Theodore Robert Bundy spent 9 years on death row, waiting in a small cell at Florida State Prison for the electric chair that would end his life. Among the horrors he committed, perhaps the most chilling was his final known murder. Kimberly Leach, taken from her middle school in broad daylight, her body later found discarded in an abandoned pig shed. But to understand how a man could become one of history's most infamous killers, we need to go back to where it all began. Hi, my beautiful family. I have missed you all. It's been a rough ride as we're currently battling some technical issues, but trust me, we're getting everything back and running. Thank you for sticking around with me. If you're already hooked in for today's video, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now let us begin. Ted Bundy entered the world under a cloud of shame on November 24th, 1946, at the Elizabeth Lund Home for Unwed Mothers in Burlington, Vermont. His mother, Eleanor Louise Cowell, known as Louise, was just 22 years old and unmarried, a scandalous situation in post-war America. The identity of Ted's father remains a mystery to this day. Louise initially named a salesman and Air Force veteran named Lloyd Marshall as the father on the birth certificate, but she later claimed she'd been seduced by a war veteran who left her pregnant. Some family members whispered darker rumors that Ted's father might actually have been Louise's own violent and abusive father, Samuel Cowell. Whatever the truth, it was a secret that would haunt the family. For the first 3 years of his life, young Theodore lived in Philadelphia with his grandparents, Samuel and Eleanor Cowell. The household was troubled from the start. Samuel Cowell was a tyrannical bully with a vicious temper who brutalized animals, pushed people downstairs, and flew into terrifying rages. He kept a large collection of pornography in the greenhouse, material that young Ted would later discover. Eleanor Cowell suffered from depression so severe that she received electroshock therapy and was periodically hospitalized. In this toxic environment, Ted was told that his mother was actually his sister and his grandparents were his parents, a deception meant to hide the shame of his illegitimate birth. In 1950, Louise made a bold decision. She took her young son and moved across the country to Tacoma, Washington, to start fresh and escape her father's shadow. There, working as a secretary, she met Johnny Culpepper Bundy, a military cook at the local hospital. They married in 1951, and Johnny adopted young Theodore, giving him the surname that would become infamous. The family eventually grew to include 4 more children, and by all accounts, Johnny Bundy was a decent, hard-working man who tried to be a good father. But something in Ted never quite fit. His mother described him as a shy, well-behaved child, but childhood friends remember something different. Ted himself later recalled an unsettling early memory. At age 3, while still living with his grandparents, he lifted the covers of his sleeping teenage Aunt Julia's bed and carefully placed kitchen knives around her sleeping body, then stood watching until she woke up screaming. Even at that tender age, something dark was stirring. As Ted grew older in Tacoma, he appeared to be a normal, even exceptional boy on the surface. He was intelligent, handsome, and articulate. He joined the Boy Scouts and attended the Methodist Church with his family. In school, he earned good grades and showed no obvious signs of trouble. But beneath this polished exterior, Ted was developing into someone else entirely. He felt like an outsider, never quite connecting with other children. He was painfully shy around girls and felt inadequate compared to wealthier classmates. By his teenage years, Ted had discovered a darkness within himself that he carefully hid from everyone around him. He began sneaking out at night, peering through windows at unsuspecting women. He started shoplifting, not out of need, but for the thrill. He stole skis, expensive items, anything that gave him that rush of power and control. These weren't just teenage pranks. They were rehearsals. Ted later admitted that by adolescence he'd developed an addiction to violent pornography, spending hours consumed by images that fused sexuality with brutality in his developing mind. Something was broken deep inside him, something that all the normal trappings of his suburban life couldn't fix. The charming young man who would eventually become a law student was simultaneously nurturing fantasies that would soon demand to become real. The stage was being set for something terrible. Ted Bundy's path to becoming a killer started in the early 1970s, but his crimes exploded in 1974. He was a smart, charming law student at the University of Washington in Seattle, living a double life. By day, he worked at a crisis hotline and dated his girlfriend, Elizabeth Klopfer. But at night, his dark urges took over. He had already been peeking into windows and stealing things for thrills. Then, something snapped. He began targeting young women, often college students who looked alike. Pretty, with long hair parted in the middle. He used tricks to lure them, like pretending his arm was hurt or acting like a cop. What started as one attack quickly turned into a nightmare spree. But how far would he go before anyone stopped him? The killings kicked off on January 4th, 1974, in Seattle's University District. Bundy sneaked into the basement room of 18-year-old Karen Sparks, a dancer and student. While she slept, he hit her hard with a metal rod from her bed and assaulted her badly with it. She woke up in agony, her body broken inside. Sparks lived, but the attack left her with brain damage that stole her sight, hearing, and dreams of dancing forever. Her family watched her fight through pain that never ended, a heartbreaking reminder of one man's cruelty. Just a month later, on February 1st, he struck again in the same city. He broke into 21-year-old Linda Ann Healy's basement bedroom. Healy was a bright radio announcer with a big future. Bundy knocked her out, dressed her in clothes, and carried her away. He drove her to a hidden spot, raped her, and killed her by hitting her head. He cut off her head and dumped her body on Taylor Mountain near Issaquah, Washington. Her family searched desperately for months, their hope turning to horror when only her skull was found later. The loss ripped them apart, leaving a void no one could fill. The pace picked up, with women vanishing almost every month. On March 12, 1974, in Olympia, Washington,
19-year-old Donna Gail Manson walked to a concert at Evergreen State College and never came back. Bundy grabbed her, killed her, and hid her on Taylor Mountain. Her body was never fully found, torturing her family with endless questions and grief. April 17th brought more terror in Ellensburg, Washington. 18-year-old Susan Elaine Rancourt left a meeting at Central Washington State College. Bundy, with his arm in a fake sling, asked for help with books to trick her into his tan Volkswagen Beetle. He drove her away, raped and killed her, then left her skull, cracked and broken, on Taylor Mountain. Her loved ones mourned a life cut short, haunted by the what-ifs. On May 6th, across the border in Corvallis, Oregon, 22-year-old Roberta Kathleen Parks stepped out for coffee from her Oregon State University dorm. Bundy lured her, tied her up, drove her to Washington, raped her twice on the way, and strangled her. Her skull ended up on Taylor Mountain, too. Her parents' world shattered, turning joy into endless sorrow. June was even worse. On June 1st, 1974, in Burien, Washington, 22-year-old Brenda Carroll Ball chatted with a man, Bundy, in a sling, outside the Flame Tavern. He took her home, had sex with her, then strangled her as she slept. Her damaged skull joined the others on Taylor Mountain. The thrill-seeking young woman's family felt the sting of a betrayal that ended in death. 10 days later, on June 11th, in Seattle, 18-year-old Georgianne Hawkins walked down a lit alley near her University of Washington sorority. Bundy, on crutches, dropped a briefcase to draw her in. He hit her with a crowbar, handcuffed her, drove to Issaquah, strangled her, and spent the night with her body. He came back 3 times for twisted reasons, even taking her jewelry during a police search. Her bones were found scattered at Issaquah, but she's still listed as missing. Her friends and family clung to memories, but the brutality stole their peace. The boldness peaked on July 14th, 1974, at Lake Sammamish State Park in Issaquah, Washington, a sunny day with crowds. Bundy, calling himself Ted with a sling, asked for sailboat help. First, he took 23-year-old Janice and Odd, a kind caseworker. 4 hours later, 19-year-old Denise Marie Naslund headed to the restroom and vanished. He drove them to a quiet spot, made one watch as he assaulted and killed the other, then dumped their bones at Issaquah. The park turned from fun to fear. Families like Ott's and Naslund's broke under the weight of public horror and private pain. Fear gripped the Northwest. Women stopped hitchhiking, campuses locked down. But Bundy? He kept working on missing persons searches, hiding in plain sight. Would he stop or take his evil elsewhere? In August 1974, Bundy moved to Salt Lake City for law school, but the killings followed. On September 2nd, he picked up an unnamed hitchhiker in Idaho, raped and strangled her, then cut her up and threw her in a river the next day. Her unknown fate left a ghost of tragedy. October 2nd, in Holiday, Utah, 16-year-old Nancy Wilcox argued with her dad and walked out. Bundy forced her into an orchard at knife point, kept her in his apartment for a day, then killed her and buried her near Capitol Reef National Park. No body meant no closure for her heartbroken family. On October 18th, in Midvale, Utah, 17-year-old Melissa Ann Smith, daughter of a police chief, left a pizza place. Bundy grabbed her, kept her alive for up to a week, beating, raping, and sodomizing her, before strangling her with stockings. Her nude body turned up in the mountains. Her dad's job made the loss even more gut-wrenching, a family shield broken. Halloween night, October 31st, 1974, in Lehi, Utah, 17-year-old Laura and M hitchhiked after a party. Bundy took her, beat her, raped, and sodomized her, then strangled her with stockings around November 20th. Her body was found in American Fork Canyon on Thanksgiving, her face so battered she was hard to recognize. He even put makeup on her corpse later. Her loved one's holiday turned to ashes, forever scarred. On November 8th, in Murray, Utah, he tried to kidnap 18-year-old Carol DeRanch at mall, posing as Officer Roseland. He handcuffed her in his car, but she fought and escaped. That same night, in Bountiful, Utah, 17-year-old Deborah Jean Kent left a school play. Bundy lured her, kept her alive half a day in his apartment, then killed her and buried her near Fairview. A bone was ID'd as hers in 2015 via DNA. DeRanch's survival gave hope, but Kent's family waited decades for answers, their pain dragging on. The spree spread to Colorado in 1975. On January 12th, in Snowmass Village, 23-year-old nurse Karen Eileen Campbell vanished from a lit hotel hall. Bundy bludgeoned her, cut her deeply, and dumped her nude body nearby. Her family clung to search efforts, only to face the tragic truth a month later. March 15th, in Vail, 26-year-old ski instructor Julie Lyle Cunningham walked to dinner. Bundy, on crutches, asked for help with skis, hit her, handcuffed her, assaulted her near rifle, and came back to her body weeks later. No remains meant endless agony for her kin. April 6th, in Grand Junction, 25-year-old Denise Lynn Oliverson biked home. He killed her in his car near the Utah border and tossed her in the Colorado River. Her bike under a bridge was the last clue. Her family's hope drowned with her. May 6th, in Pocatello, Idaho, he lured 12-year-old Lynette Dawn Culver from school to his hotel, raped her, drowned her in the tub, and dumped her in the Snake River. As a child victim, her death crushed her family beyond words. June 28th, in Provo, Utah, 15-year-old Susan Curtis walked at a conference at Brigham Young University. Bundy killed and buried her near Price. Another young life gone, another family in ruins. Communities panicked. Parents warned kids. Women carried weapons. But Bundy blended in, even dating Carol and Boone. How long could his luck hold? After these murders, Bundy kept up his normal life, studying law, visiting his girlfriend, even getting baptized. But clues piled up. Clover tipped police about him multiple times. On August 16th, 1975, a cop stopped him in Granger, Utah for odd driving. His car had masks, a crowbar, handcuffs, rope, and an ice pick, tools of terror. They linked hairs to victims like Campbell. He was charged with kidnapping DeRanch, convicted in 1976, and sent to Utah prison for 1 to 15 years. In 1977, Colorado extradited him for Campbell's murder. But Bundy wasn't done. On June 7th, 1977, in Aspen, Colorado, during a court hearing, he jumped from a second-floor window as his own lawyer. He hid in the mountains, stole food and a car, but was caught after 6 days, hurt and hungry. Back in jail in Glenwood Springs, he plotted again. He sawed a hole in his cell's ceiling, lost 35 pounds to squeeze through, and escaped on December 30th, 1977. He stole cars, took buses and planes, and landed in Tallahassee, Florida by January 8th, 1978, posing as Chris Hagen near Florida State University. He stole to eat and lived low. The horror restarted fast. On January 15th, 1978, he slipped into the Chi Omega sorority house through a bad door. In 15 minutes, he bludgeoned 21-year-old Margaret Elizabeth Bowman to death with wood and strangled her with a stocking. Next, 20-year-old Lisa Janet Levy. He beat her, strangled her, bit her buttock deeply, and assaulted her with a bottle. Then, 21-year-old Kathy Kleiner, broken jaw, torn cheek, and 21-year-old Karen Chandler, concussion, broken jaw, lost teeth, crushed finger. Headlights scared him off. They survived, but with lifelong scars, physical pain, and nightmares. 8 blocks away, he attacked 21-year-old Cheryl Thomas in her home, breaking her jaw and skull, leaving her deaf and unable to dance. Semen and a mask with his hairs were left behind. The sorority turned from sisterhood to a scene of blood and screams. Survivors and families relived the terror in therapy for years. On February 8th, 1978, in Jacksonville, Florida, he tried to grab 14-year-old Leslie Parmenter but fled. That afternoon, in Lake City, he lured 12-year-old Kimberly Diane Leach from school to a stolen van. He raped her, cut her throat, mutilated her, and dumped her in an old pig shed near Sewanee River State Park. Her mummified body was found weeks later. As his youngest known victim, her innocent school day, ending in violence, devastated her family, who fought for justice amid overwhelming grief. After the Florida attacks, Bundy ran low on cash and stole a car to flee west. On February 15th, 1978, near Pensacola, Florida, Officer David Lee stopped him for stolen plates. Bundy fought but was arrested. The car had victim IDs and items. "I wish you had killed me," he said. Bite marks matched Levy's wounds, fibers linked to Leach, and witnesses sealed it. He was tried in 1979 for Chi Omega, 2 death sentences, and 1980 for Leach, 3rd death. Appeals dragged until his execution in 1989, but the damage was done. Dozens of lives destroyed, families forever changed. Ted Bundy always played the innocent charmer, even when the noose tightened. After his final arrest in Pensacola, Florida, on February 15th, 1978, he denied everything at first. He claimed he was just a drifter named Kenneth Meisner, using stolen IDs to hide. For the Chi Omega sorority attacks and Kimberly Leach's murder, his main defense was simple: "I didn't do it." He had no solid alibi for the nights of terror, saying he was alone in his room or wandering Tallahassee, but nothing concrete. As evidence piled up, he switched tactics, attacking the police work and calling it a witch hunt. But could his smooth talk fool a jury, or would science seal his fate? Bundy's first big trial was in Utah for kidnapping Carol Duranchback in 1974. He denied knowing her or being Officer Roseland, with no alibi to back him up. His lawyer argued mistaken identity, but Duranch picked him from a lineup, and a handcuff key from a school, linked to another victim, matched ones in his car. Hairs from Duranch were like those in his VW Beetle. In a quick bench trial in February 1976, no jury because of bad press, Judge Stuart Hansen found him guilty after 4 days. Sentenced on June 30th, 1976, to 1 to 15 years in prison. It was just the start. Bundy escaped twice from Colorado jails while facing murder charges there, dodging a full trial for Karen Campbell's killing. His defense there? Self-representation, but he jumped out a window on June 7th, 1977, and fled again on December 30th, 1977, only to kill more in Florida. Those runs made any alibis look like lies. The real drama hit in Florida. First, the Chi Omega trial in Miami, starting June 25th, 1979. Bundy fired his lawyers and represented himself, turning court into a show. His defense, no proof it was him. He grilled witnesses like Nita Neary, who saw a man with a club leaving the sorority house on January 15, 1978. He called it shaky ID, but prosecutors hit back hard. Bite marks on Lisa Levy's body matched Bundy's crooked teeth. Experts Richard Suverin and Lowell Levine showed casts that fit perfectly, a first for TV trials. Fibers from his clothes linked to victims, and hairs from a mask at another attack site matched his. Survivors Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler testified through tears about the brutal beatings. Bundy even put his girlfriend Carol and Boone on the stand as a character witness, but his cross-exams backfired, making him look cocky. After 250 reporters watched the circus, the jury deliberated less than 7 hours. On July 24, 1979, guilty on 2 murders, Levy and Margaret Bowman, 3 attempted murders, and 2 burglaries. But the sentencing? Judge Edward Cowart called Bundy a bright young man who'd gone wrong, then hit him with 2 death sentences on July 31, 1979. Take care of yourself, the judge said oddly. Would Bundy crack or keep fighting? 6 months later, the Kimberly Leach trial in Orlando began January 7, 1980. Bundy again played lawyer, denying he lured the 12-year-old from school on February 9, 1978. His alibi? He was around Lake City, but not involved, blamed bad witnesses. Defense focused on weak links, like no direct proof of the killing. But an eyewitness saw him lead Leach to a white van. Fibers with rare flaws from Bundy's jacket matched the van and her body. A school friend ID'd him too. In a wild twist, Bundy proposed to Boone on the stand February 9, 1980. She said yes, and under Florida law, they married right there, notary and all. Only his mom begged for mercy in the penalty phase. The jury took under 8 hours, guilty of murder and kidnapping on February 7, 1980. Judge Cowart sentenced him to death a 3rd time on February 10, 1980. Bundy yelled, "Tell the jury they were wrong." Appeals dragged on, but the U.S. Supreme Court denied his last stay. His charm couldn't save him forever. What secrets would he spill before the end? Ted Bundy spent nearly a decade on death row at Florida State Prison in Rayford, a stark, high-security facility known for its tough conditions and infamous electric chair, Old Sparky. His cell was small and isolated, about 6 by 9 feet, with a bed, toilet, and sink, typical for death row inmates under constant watch to prevent escapes. Or suicides. Bundy, ever the manipulator, often caused minor troubles for the guards, like flooding his cell block in 1983 by repeatedly flushing his toilet, earning him a disorderly conduct charge. In 1984, prison staff found hacksaw blades hidden in his cell during a routine security check, sparking fears of another escape attempt from a man who'd already fled twice before. These acts seemed like bored pranks to annoy authorities, but they highlighted his ongoing defiance, even as the weight of his crimes, dozens of brutal murders, hung over him like a shadow. Guards described him as charming yet whiny, a wimp who tried to control situations, but he was kept under strict surveillance, with officers beating the bars to check for tampering. Interactions with other inmates were limited. Bundy saw himself as superior, an amateur turned predator unlike the rest, but they sometimes pooled money to bribe guards for privileges, like intimate visits with women. This allowed Bundy conjugal time with his wife, Carol and Boone, leading to the birth of their daughter, Rose, in 1982, a rare glimpse of normalcy in a life defined by horror. Bundy passed his days reading books, writing letters, and giving interviews, like the taped sessions with journalists Stephen Michaud and Hugh Ainsworth, where he spoke of his killings in the 3rd person, as if describing someone else, a clever way to confess without fully owning the evil. He showed no true remorse, never expressing guilt or shame for the family shattered by his actions. Instead, he blamed external forces like pornography for fueling his urges, as he told psychologist James Dobson in a final interview. Religion entered his life sporadically. He'd been baptized Mormon earlier, but on death row, he met with ministers, perhaps seeking solace or delay. His many appeals dragged on for years, challenging everything from his mental competency to the trial's fairness, stalling executions set for 1986 and beyond until the U.S. Supreme Court denied his last pleas in early 1989. In those quiet prison moments, Bundy claimed to be a changed man, but his manipulations lingered, a reminder that the monster who stole so many lives never fully faced the depth of his darkness. As years ticked by, the isolation must have weighed heavy, turning a once charismatic killer into a shadow of himself, waiting for the end. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy's final day began in the dim hours before dawn at Florida State Prison, where he had spent a restless night weeping and praying with Methodist minister Fred Lawrence, who sat outside his isolated cell. He was visibly shaken, his usual confidence gone, as guard watched him full-time, just 30 paces from the execution chamber. Bundy made phone calls to his mother, Louise Bundy, twice that morning, sharing emotional goodbyes, though she chose not to attend, calling the scene a circus too painful to endure. His wife, Carol and Boone, and daughter were not present either. Around 5 a.m., he declined a special last meal, so prison officials served the standard: medium-rare steak over easy eggs, hash browns, toast with butter and jelly, milk, and juice, but he refused to touch it, his appetite lost in the face of death. As the clock neared 7 a.m., Bundy was led into the execution chamber before 42 witnesses, including victims' families seeking closure. Strapped to the electric chair, a thick leather belt across his mouth and chin, and a metal skull cap with a black veil over his face, he looked solemn and pale. When asked for last words, his voice quavered as he turned to his lawyer, Jim Coleman, and Minister Fred Lawrence. "Jim and Fred, I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." At 7:06 a.m., the anonymous executioner flipped the switch, sending 2,000 volts through his body in Florida's electric chair. He was pronounced dead at 7:16 a.m., ending a chapter of terror that had haunted so many. Outside, crowds cheered, but for the victims' loved ones, it was a quiet, bittersweet justice after years of pain. In the end, Ted Bundy's story serves as a grim reminder of how evil can hide behind a normal face, leaving scars that time can't fully heal. But was the death penalty true justice for his victims? Or does it raise bigger questions about society's need for vengeance versus rehabilitation? Share your thoughts below and hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss the next one.